I've been coming to this conference since the first one in 2010. And you know, no one ever says thank you to Nicola for putting on this great conference and meaningful conference every year. And I was thinking back to the first one in 2010, which in the same building. And, you know, we lived in a different world then. We communicated a lot electronically, but we never actually really saw people. There was no real social media in use and so on. So I think I first got to know Nicola around about 2002, I think probably around about body scanners. So I knew of Nicola's existence. So when we arrived on the first day here, we're kind of looking around and saying, where on earth is Nicola? There was this really enthusiastic guy walking around in a suit, looking very elegant. We thought he was the AV guy. And then it dawned on us, of course, Nicola was actually Nicola. Because in England and the US, Nicola is quite a common lady's name. So I would like to take this chance to ask everybody here to give, on behalf of the thousands of delegates that have come over the last 13 years, and also the hundreds of exhibitors that have been here, a big thank you to Nicola for organizing this conference. And I went back through the years at the various presentations here. By the way, I took this picture. There aren't many cities in this world where you can stay in Paradiso, but this is one of them, and this was from my hotel room in 2011, so I do own the copyright on this one. But we've had some very interesting presentations over the years, but one that I really want to highlight is as a presentation that changed the world. And that was back in 2012 when Michael Black and I did a keynote. It was called From Scans to Avatars. And you know, sometimes you go to these conferences and a couple of guys stand up and talk about something about the future. But what we're going to show here in my part of this, and what you will see with Meshcapade when they do their presentation tomorrow, the manifesto that we laid down in 2012 has really been persistent and survived well into the world of computer vision and its evolution into AI and concepts like the metaverse and so on. And I think there are very few conferences where something like that could happen, bringing together commercial and academic to make a statement on the future. We've been great collaborators, but we also have different opinions on the world, where the world is going. And I think that's what's made this very exciting, and that to me was one of the great highlights of the last 20 years of working in this area. And for us, it has been 20 years, not 25 years, but this month is the 25th anniversary of 3DMD shipping the first system. And that is it. That was a beauty picture from the marketing brochure at the time. It was called an S4M. Now, what is interesting is that system, I think, was delivered to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. It ceased use in about 2012, if I recall, and was recycled. But right in the outset, that system used and had compliance with data standards. So I actually found the old data, the pre-shipped data on the system in one of our archives, and the WRL files still load into our current software. And that degree of continuity in this business is extremely important because we're all facing some complex challenges going forward. To 3DMD, these are sometimes almost boring standards, but they're very, very important. To us, we have always been ISO certified from the outset. That means every process we undertake in the organization is subject to audit. And, you know, I have to boast, we have nearly 10,000 customer deliveries. We've never missed a single date on one. And that's because we've always run the organization to standards. And equally, if we look at the importance of data standards, that will crop up on the panel session later on. There is representation here from the Web3 Consortium, of which I'm also a board member. And I think it's really important that we do things in an open and adopt standards going forwards. And from our point of view, we got through COVID. We saw a big change in market, but we actually grew during COVID because everybody started scanning hands instead of faces and bodies because it was a little more hygienic. But also it was an area of great advancement. So this is a kind of what a scanner looks like nowadays. It's a bit different from that beauty shot of the S4M that I showed earlier on. And here's a still image taken from a 4D sequence of a guy interacting with a skateboard. But I have to do a premiere here, and so we started playing around some other things. Now, we've adopted, when we do data recruitment, or when we do subject recruitment, we found that it's really practical to bring in couples wherever we can. It solves the chaperoning issue. There's somewhere communication on it. And often at the end of capture sessions, we can record about 40 minutes to 60 minutes of data without stopping. I don't always recommend that. But we ask the subjects to come in and just freelance, do something interesting. These two have been married about a year, so we decided they would do a hug in the system. And this is a technology we've brought out over the last year or so, which has expanded considerably the space in which you can perform. And I'll be talking more about that in my talk later on. But we asked, and it's quite capable of looking at, I think we got it up to 5 people and without too many occlusions in this particular configuration. But here we have 2 people interacting. Terrific stuff. At the same time, we've really been looking at areas like facial tracking and so on. This is the infamous Goldfinger project from a couple of years ago. So we've taken that data and we're tracking to that form. So what happens if we now try and bring them together? What happens if we want to try and track the face or the hands as we're looking at the body and movement? Well, that's pretty straightforward. We've got Andrew's presenting at 4:20 today, reciting some Welsh poetry here and so on, and here we have the face mask that's been taken from the body scan. Now, I wonder if we can just bring these two together. And that really is the importance of what scanning is all about. It's a long time since we were scanning in these positions. It's being able to look at not just single avatars and a natural movement, but how they interact with each other. So as you can see here, we're looking at the emotions in those faces as they move together in that spatiality. So no longer are we trying to look at constrained area. It's almost constrained in the wild, to use an old a version of a computer vision term. So I'd like to finish that with a debut. We've not actually shown that before. I'm going to show an even more interesting one at the end of the next presentation. And we're going to split what we discussed into 2 parts, rather like the way that Michael and I did it 11 years ago. I'm going to present something very much on the scanning capabilities, and then at 4:20 this afternoon, Andrew is going to present on the software. So we're going to look at how do we get this near ground truth data from the scanning system, and then how can we actually utilize the quality of that data to begin to provide the type of training sets that are going to be needed for the future and use of 3D. Thank you very much.